Hello and welcome to Just Films and That. This is the podcast that celebrates films we reckon might be underrated or underseen. I'm your host for this week, Alice Oliver. With me, as always, is Josh Hallam, and it was his turn to pick the film this week, and he went with Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer from 2007. So let's get to it. Bit of a fun one this week as we follow on from Fantastic Four into Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. So very excited about that. But first, Josh, why don't you tell our listeners all about our Patreon?
Yeah, so just a little bit before we get started, if you want a little bit of extra content from us or some bonus stuff or access to episodes a day early, you can head on over to patreon.com/justfilms and that. The link to that will be in the episode description for this, wherever you're listening to it. There's loads of tiers there, loads of bonus content. All tiers contain access to episodes a day early, and all the episodes on there are extended by a little bit as well. And the prices start from a quid a month. So if you fancy a little bit of stuff, get on over there, patreon.com/justfilms and that.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, Josh. And then back to this week's film. So, Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. So, like I said, we did Fantastic Four last week. And then, in a stroke of genius, Josh, just as we were finishing that episode, you thought, why don't we? Why don't we do it? Let's do the sequel, which also may be underrated or underseen, which is very exciting. So, this film is from 2007. Spoiler warning, listeners, if you haven't seen it yet. So, Josh, do tell us, what is the film about and why did you pick it?
So Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer follows on from the first Fantastic Four film, which we did last week. We find our heroes. I don't really know how long after them being the Fantastic Four it is. I think it's about the same amount of time that passed between the films, which is about a year or two. Something like that. Anyway,
not long.
They're cracking on, doing what they're doing, saving the world, being heroes. At the meantime, Reed and Sue, Mr. Fantastic, and Sue Storm are going to try and become Mr. and Mrs. Fantastic, as they are in the comics. They're trying to get married, but it keeps getting foiled by the fact that they're constantly having to save the world. At the same time, a mysterious invader from outer space turns up called the Silver Surfer, and basically says that the world is going to end if they don't do something about it. In the meantime, they also have to contend with the return of their foe from the first film, the amply named Doctor Doom.
There he is.
With a healthy supply of Just for Men in this version. My word, they went a shade darker with his hair. But anyway, why did I pick this one? So, well, we did Fantastic Four last week, right?
We did indeed.
Now, this was on my list anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And when you'd pick Fantastic Four, I didn't realise just how poorly rated the original Fantastic Four, as in the one that we did last week, was. Mm-hmm. I thought that one was sort of considered to be fine. I didn't think it was considered to be like amazing. I didn't think it was considered to be absolute trash. I thought it was, sort of like well received. It was okay. It was a good blockbuster. And obviously it turns out, as we saw last week, it was really poorly received. Now this I knew was poorly received. Mm-hmm. So I'm going at this is underrated. And I thought, well, we did the first one last week. Why not do the second one this week? So for people if there's anyone out there who listens to us who really hates the Fantastic Four, we've definitely lost them.
No, they should be even more interested because they should be desperate to know what kind of argument could we possibly make for these films that they hate. What argument can we make to why they could be underrated or underseen? It's part of the fun, isn't it? I bet they're still with us. I bet they want to hear it.
So, have you seen this one before?
No, have not seen it. So I was very excited about that one.
Okay then. Okay, so, well, what did you think then? Because I'm interested to know. Obviously, you picked it. It's an interesting one, this, because you picked last week's and I picked this week's, but they're part of the same, two films. There was obviously they didn't make any more, so the twosome or whatever you want to call it. What did you think?
I mean, it was a definite improvement on the first one. I think it's definitely better. I think just objectively it's better. So a lot of this I do think is going to be a lot of comparisons to the first one. Yeah. I don't really think there's anything wrong with that. Obviously trying to look at it as its own film, but ultimately it is a sequel and it's quite similar to the first one in the sort of vibe and the whole feel of the whole thing. But I do think this was a stark improvement. So I do think it looks pretty good most of the time. So I particularly like all the space stuff. A lot of it feels like a lot more stylish and a lot more slick than the first one. And I feel like the quality of the visuals stands up even today, even though we're 16 years later. A lot of the visuals around
16 years.
Yes, I know, yeah. When you think about
that is absolutely disgusting.
That's like
that's
a whole
that's the worst thing you've ever said to me on this
person.
podcast.
I'm so sorry. I'm
the
so
worst
sorry.
The worst thing you've ever said to me on this podcast is that this film was released 16 years ago.
16 years
I remember
ago.
watching this as a bug-eyed young 16-year-old chap, you know, watching it in the cinema, thinking, might not get better than this for comic book films.
Oh, wow. Well, there we go. Weren't you pleasantly surprised?
But I can't believe it. Sorry, as you were saying, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's fucking
okay.
disgusting. Go on,
It's disgusting. I hate you. This is the end of the podcast.
Yeah, shove it in
Get
your
the
arse,
fuck out.
Alice. Don't ever say that to me again.
Done.
No, go on.
It's
What
done.
else?
Wait till I tell you about Meet Me in St. Louis, man. That
I remember sitting in the cinema watching Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yeah.
In,
I'm thinking it's never going to get better than this.
Musical set in St. Louis never going to get any better than this. That's what I thought to myself. Yeah.
And really, did it?
Songs
I'm not sure.
about trolleys. It's a peak here. This is it.
Loved it, man. Loved it. It earned that 100% Rotten Tomatoes rating. That's right, listeners. If you didn't know that episode, Meet Me in St. Louis got 100%. So a lot of the visuals around, is it oh my goodness, Galactus?
Galactus. Yeah. So for the people who haven't seen it, Galactus is
Galactus.
Is
right.
so in the comics,
the villain.
Galactus is like he's one of the Eternals. So a little bit, if you've seen Marvel's The Eternals,
yeah.
he's one of them. So he's just sort of, I don't know if I don't know. He's not one I know inside and out. He's either a god or a demigod or some sort of massively powerful creature, and he eats planets. Basically, in the comics, there's different like, but then even they reboot the comics and they look different. So the version in this did get a lot of criticism, which we'll come on to, because he's just a big cloud.
Sure.
But in the comics, he has been a big cloud. But in the comics, he's a guy. He's just a big old fella who literally eats planets like you or I would eat a lovely crisp apple.
Right. Oh, yeah. He the whole thing around it reminded me of, oh shit, I forgot it. The thing from the Green Lantern.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that called?
Parallax.
Yeah.
So there was obviously they released not that far apart. I mean, a lot far apart, I suppose, in like film terms, but 3 or 4 years apart.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember people saying, you need to show the villain, stop showing us these big fucking clouds, and then lo and behold, we get we got Thanos and all the good Loki and
I quite like the big scary clouds. I like it.
So that's Galactus. He is a bit like Parallax, although it's not he is not displayed in this film in the traditional sense that people think of him as, which is a guy with a big purple and blue helmet on, who is a big planet eater. And the Silver Surfer in this and in the comics is his herald. So he's the guy who goes to I think he's sort of like a scout. He goes to the planets to check them out to see if he can eat them. He's like a restaurant critic, Alice.
Yeah,
he's
like a little bit. Yeah, is this edible for my master?
And the whole deal is that if he does that for him, he won't eat his planet.
Yeah.
Little grass. Do you know what I mean? He's just a grass. But yeah, so that's the deal with that. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Big old cloud boy.
I quite like it. I quite like the big old cloud thing, and I'm shocked that you said that some people didn't like it. I guess
it went down like a sack of shit. That.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's the main thing that people will say about this film is that they did Galactus, and they made it a big CGI cloud, basically. I don't completely hate it. I don't completely hate it. I'd like to see.
It's scary. It's ominous. He's
a big cloud.
It's massive. It's he's what's that word for when something is so unbelievably enormous? I can't remember the word, but so in where it's like all consuming in its giganticism or whatever.
Yeah.
Like
it's just. It is. I don't think it's the worst comic book decision ever made in a comic book film. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not showing it's not sewing Deadpool's mouth shut in X-Men Origins Wolverine. It's I sort of see the logic behind doing it because I wonder in this whether they thought we can't really do the big purple and blue guy justice.
Right.
Like maybe they just couldn't find a way. There are certain villains that are massive in the comics that the MCU hasn't even touched. So there have been hints towards Galactus and there have been hints towards Doctor Doom. Well, Doctor Doom and Galactus are probably the two biggest Marvel villains
Right.
alongside. There's a couple of others that they have touched on, but the ones they've used. So Thanos is a big villain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you think of that, I would say the villains that sort of Marvel have are Thanos, Doctor Doom, and Galactus, right?
Mm.
And there are others as well, and I'm sure there will be comic books fans screaming at me as well. But the fact that they haven't got close to doing Doctor Doom and doing Galactus yet, it might be because obviously the Fantastic Four haven't been done yet because of licensing reasons and stuff like that. But B, it might. I just wonder if what they're trying to do is build the world like they have done, and in the meantime try and figure out how they're going to do it, because they are quite sort of daft villains. You know, if you think of to put Loki in the MCU makes sense, and to put Thanos in the MCU makes sense, and any alien or robot you can say, but a big planet-eating alien, I think that's quite a lot. And I remember when even, when they did Captain America, you got to bear in mind the MCU is built on a load of heroes that Marvel, the comic book company, sold off because they were going bankrupt, and they sold off what they thought were the heroes that they'd never really get much joy out of. So that's why they sold Iron Man and Captain America and Thor. And lo and behold, we're 15 years or whatever it is into the MCU now, and we've got successful franchises built off a World War II propaganda super soldier, a space Viking. Do you know what I mean? And a guy who builds himself a super suit that flies around and all that sort of stuff, as well as, a guy who's bit by a spider and a guy that's an ant and all the other stuff. So I just wonder, are they waiting to build it up and put them in, or are they trying to figure it out? So sort of circling back to our original point, I'm not sure the cloud thing is the stupidest thing ever, but I can also see if you went into this really excited for Galactus, you would be
the
disappointed.
Traditional sense. I get that, and I do get that, and I know that people do get disappointed when maybe it strays too far from the source material or whatever, and if you're expecting something and those expectations aren't met, then that can be quite disappointing. So fair enough. But as a person who's obviously never read the comic books, my understanding and knowledge of the comic books is so superficial, surface level. I know the odd thing, and most of it is just stuff that Ollie's told me, because he has a much sort of deeper interest in everything.
Obviously, you've said you didn't know loads about the comic books. Did you know about the Silver Surfer? Had you heard of him?
No, I don't think so. I'd known. Does he come up? Does he come up in WandaVision or something? Or is that something that I'm making up? Or Quicksilver?
Yeah, a lot of silver guys.
So then no, a lot of silver guys. So I knew that silver. I knew that this film was Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer. I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what he looked like, what he was about, what he stood for, anything. So no, I had no idea. But I really liked him. I thought he was a really great character, just visually and sort of what he stands for as well. I thought he comes across as very compelling after about 5 lines of dialogue. And with some of these characters, they don't even feel that compelling after 2 films sort of thing. So I really liked him. He sort of visually reminded me a bit of a cross between the T-1000 and Dr. Manhattan from Watchmen.
Yeah, he is.
So I quite enjoyed that. Yeah, when he's all liquidy. So I really enjoyed him. Do you like him as a character?
Yeah, he's not one I've read loads of. There was a cartoon in the 90s do you know the X-Men cartoons from the 90s?
Vaguely, I know what that looks like.
Around the same time, there was a Silver Surfer one as well, or he was in those or whatever. So I do know him. He is one, I believe, they're trying to get into the MCU because there's a lot of talk about Keanu Reeves playing him. But in the same way in this. So it would be CGI, and he would do the voice.
That's funny, because wasn't Lawrence Fishburne doing the voice?
Yeah, and then the guy who plays Cypher is going to do it. Yeah, Trinity's going to do it next. But
Trinity's going to pop up. Carry on.
I've seen a few people saying Keanu Reeves has the sort of voice, but then is it because he's so affiliated with surfing?
Well, yeah, it made me think of Point Break immediately. That when you said that, so
yeah. So anyway, what else? What else did you like?
So I do feel like the whole story, the idea, the vision, whatever you want to call it, it all feels a lot more focused in this film than in the first one, and just a lot more clearer. I think it's more obvious what the characters want and what their motivations are, why people are doing certain things, which is just obviously just some basic expectations that you have when you watch a film, is that all that stuff is nice and clear for you. But because I feel like the first one was lacking a bit in those areas, it was just kind of a bit of relief that it was in this one, and then they sort of learnt from their mistakes. Some of the performances I thought were better in this as well. Not amazing, but certainly an improvement. There's a bit of more kind of relationship development between Johnny and Reed, which I quite enjoyed. And at times I found that quite funny and quite endearing. And I felt more invested in those two as a pairing than I did in Reed and Susan, to be quite honest.
Into the
I've just
people
had
who are
like
getting
two
married.
films. It's just been like two films of that relationship being forced down our throats, and I just don't really I don't feel it at all. But I'll come on to that in the dislikes probably a little bit more. What were kind of the key things for you in this then, especially watching it this time around, that you thought actually that is excellent or that is really good?
Yeah, I enjoyed it just as much this time. I did enjoy it. I do enjoy it more than the first one. I think the first one is a little, it's fine. Like we touched that on that last week, but I do think it's a little bland and a little formulaic, which I think they do a little bit more in this, which I really like. I think it works well as a sequel. So I know that sounds probably like a silly thing to say, but these things don't often work as sequels. Sometimes they keep them as standalone films, and sometimes they follow on and all that sort of stuff. So there's some good character development that you've already touched on. So, for example, in the first one, Ben Grimm gets a lot more play in terms of him dealing with being the Thing, whereas in this one, Johnny gets a bit more of a story arc in terms of growing up and coming into himself and being a little bit less of a cocky sort of playboy. There's some good ideas in it as well. So things like, what's the big thing that everyone associates, particularly with the Fantastic Four, is that they are pretty much a family, and that they work as a team, and you see that in this. I really like that in this, and the way that they do that, which I think is quite good in this, is that they bring in a plot device, which is that through interaction with the Silver Surfer, Johnny's sort of powers and molecules are disrupted. So if he touches one of the other Fantastic Four, he swaps powers with them. And I think it's quite an interesting dynamic. I don't think it was something that had been done much at the time. And they do a lot with it in terms of, yes, they use it for comedy. So, they have him swap with the Thing, and he's all handsome, and then he looks at the Thing. So he's like, oh no, I'm an ugly rock man. Which is what I think every morning when I wake up. But anyway, well then, they also do things like they figure out that they can all give him his powers, and in a sort of end of Power Rangers, all making loads of dinosaurs into one big dinosaur robot type thing. They make they make a Fantastic One from the Fantastic Four. So I thought that was quite good. And it was playful. It was funny. It was good character progression, I thought. I do think, controversially, we've touched on the villain. I think the villain in this is better than the villain in the first one. And obviously Doctor Doom is in both. But I think the overall inciting incident and threat is better than the first one, because the first one of my main criticisms, if you cast your mind back to the long old time ago of last week, was he doesn't seem to have a plan, he doesn't seem to have a motivation, he's just doing stuff to be arch. Whereas in this, okay, it's simple and it's quite basic, but the plan is, well, he has to consume planets to live, and he's coming to the planet, so you better sort it all out. And Doom is back, but Doom is back as a sort of subplot to the whole thing. And even Doom's plan in this makes more sense, which is revenge, I suppose, against the Fantastic Four. So I quite like that. Captain Holt's in this.
So just being Captain Holt,
just great
as well,
to see,
right?
innit?
Just
great
being him. Really entertaining.
If you don't watch Brooklyn Nine-Nine, we're talking about Andre Braugher. I think it's Brower. I think that's how you pronounce it. Who is a character in Brooklyn Nine-Nine. He's been in loads of stuff. He's got a very storied career, but to a lot of people, he is Captain Holt.
Yeah, definitely for younger audiences, for modern audiences, for sure.
Yeah, and then just to touch on you, I think that the production design looks good. First one, like we touched on last week, is really bold and really colourful, and this keeps that, but it does dim it down slightly, so I think it looks just a little bit sleeker and a little bit cooler. And just to finish as well, I think they nail the Silver Surfer in terms of his design, his look, his voice, the way he moves, the way he is. Yep. We'll come on to it a little bit. I think he could have been used more, but I think he's absolutely, I think they nail it in this.
Yeah, agreed with everything you just said. We'll move on now then to talking about anything that we didn't like about the film, or perhaps anything that we would change. So go on, Josh. I reckon there's probably going to be a few things between us.
There's a couple of things. So first and foremost, I'd be interested to know what you think of this, but fucking dance scene. The dance
Uh,
scene at the stag do, or bachelor party, as they
oh my
call it in
god,
America.
I can't even
Reed
remember.
dances and he uses his powers to dance.
Oh, a lot, and he's like twisting around the ladies,
Yeah,
and
and
then
it's just a
Jessica
bit.
Alba walks,
It's just a
Susan,
bit.
sorry, walks in and
It's
sees
just
it.
a.
Yeah,
Yeah,
got
I
ya.
just was like, didn't need it.
Mhm.
Didn't need that scene at all. It's almost like that's the sort of thing that someone comes up with and no one goes, that doesn't really fit.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? No one will say no to the person who's suggesting it because it's usually someone in control or power or whatever. So what did you think of that scene? So I didn't know if you'd say, oh no, actually I didn't mind that scene, or it's just a bit, yeah.
I mean,
Not
I
bothered
didn't
on
even
that scene?
remember it. I
No.
literally didn't even remember it.
Right, so it didn't
had
have
to
an
sort of
effect
jog
on
my
you
memory.
then.
So yeah, I
Okay.
don't think it impacted me at all. But
Okay.
it's almost like they took out all the stuff of Susan Storm being kind of almost naked all the time and having to do that, but turning invisible, but then becoming not invisible again with her underwear and stuff, all that. They sort of took that out, but then had to put this in, right? It's like we got to have some ladies doing some sexy stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Sexy ladies, haven't you? Like, who is going to go and watch a film without sexy ladies or sexy men in it, Alice? You know what I mean?
Well, exactly.
Like,
That
what
is
a
the
waste of
question.
money. No. So that brings me nicely to my next point, which is Sue, which is I just don't think she's given as much to do in this. I remember
Right.
watching the first one for last week's episode, and I'd falsely remembered that they didn't give her loads to do, and that she was there to be a bit of a damsel in distress and to get her kit off because she had to turn invisible and stuff like that. But actually, I was pleasantly surprised last week because I do think they made her the sort of emotional heart of the team, the driving force of the team, keeping the other three in line, sort of thing. So and she had that emotional connection with the villain as well. So I remember thinking that last week. Whereas in this, the only defining thing I can think about her role in this film is two things. One, the Silver Surfer doesn't do something to her because she looks like his girlfriend.
No, yeah.
And the other one
that's a real Martha moment, isn't
yeah,
it?
and the other thing is she just wants to get married. Because as we know, Alice, that's all women want.
It's
It's
women
everything.
want. I've told you this, Josh.
You just want
I've told
bloody, you just want to get married, don't you? That's all you want, all of you. I've asked every single one of you. So yeah, I was I'd forgotten just how much it was her getting upset that she wasn't getting married.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a touch of that with this. Then the other thing as well, that just to finish on, is that the Silver Surfer should be in it more.
Yeah, I agree.
To call it the rise of the Silver Surfer, well, he doesn't. There's no rise involved. He's powerful when he gets there, and that's it.
Yeah, what is the rise? That is a very good point.
Yeah,
What is the
should,
rise?
It
What's
should
he
just be
rising
called.
from?
They could have just called it the Fantastic Four and the Silver Surfer.
And the Silver Surfer.
Yeah,
Unless
and the arrival
you
of the Silver Surfer.
Because at the very end, because at the end, he's sort of unconscious, floating through space. You think he's dead, and then he kind of wakes up, doesn't he?
He does the whole sacrifice
That's the
himself
rise
thing,
of the Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
That end split second of the film, right? That's what you're talking about.
And that's the tease for the film they obviously never made. But
Yeah.
anyway, that's about it from me. But, couple of things there that do drag it down a little bit, which could have probably been fixed. What about you then? I bet you've got a couple of bits to say. Is it that there's not enough wedding stuff in it because you love weddings?
No, there's not enough. I want it to be all about that. She should have married the Silver Surfer.
should have been-
It could have
it
been
should have
called The
been
Marriage of the Silver Surfer.
Looking at plates, looking at the menu,
I
booking
want
the
all of
DJ. Yeah.
I want all of it. So the script, the dialogue, the delivery, all of that, it's not great, right? So it is certainly an improvement on the first film, but it's still not amazing. And I think overall that is the biggest problem with this film for me. And then bouncing off that, I really don't give a shit about Reed and Susan. I really don't about their relationship. Their relationship is such a huge focus of both these films, and I could not care less. Like, we are not given anywhere near enough backstory of the two of them to be invested in them as a couple. And considering how time-consuming their relationship is in these films, I need like a 10-minute prologue of the two of them years ago, getting together, enjoying each other, then breaking up in heart-wrenching conditions or something, right? You can't just start this story by being like, oh yeah, these two used to be together, then they broke up, but then they still like each other and they'll get back together eventually and all this. I was like, you can't just tell me that. I need to see it. I need to feel it. I need to care about these characters. There was like the occasional time where it reminded me a little bit of Tony Stark and Pepper Potts, except just done much worse. And I think that part of the problem with this film and with the film in general is that there's so little show don't tell. throughout both films.
Yes.
Everything is told to the audience in explicit terms. There is no reading between the lines. There's no subtle language or body language or reactions, etc., to indicate that something is deeper, than it seems on surface level. You just get told as the audience, we used to be together, now we're trying to make it work, and you should care about this and feel emotionally invested. Well, I don't, I'm not, and it just grew tiresome. Like, I just did not care about that. I cared more, like I said before, about Reed and Johnny. Their relationship was more fun. It was more endearing, because it just always feels like Susan comes on screen and she's like, well, Reed, you were the reason that this, and this. And he's like, oh, I'm so sorry, but we can be together because I love you so much and all this. And I was just, it was just boring.
Yeah, and I think there doesn't, for me, it's a bit of a throwback to when this sort of love interest / relationship device was used in every, not just comic book film, but every blockbuster film to try and you put two actors together and hope that they sparkle and all that sort of stuff, and to bring a touch of romance or emotional depth to the story. But even if you look at both films together, there is no reason why they couldn't have just already been together.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they could have it could have already been married. Do you know what I mean? They could have, because they could have just been two scientists that both work for Doctor Doom.
Yeah.
And if you want that emotional depth of the fact that Victor, I tell you what, here's something I'd change, okay, about both films, which is why does so one of the things we touched on last week is there's no reason why Victor hates them. He seems to hate Sue because she runs off with Reed and they get together. Okay, so he's a little jilted boy and he's all unhappy. But what if, for example, they're already together, they're a married couple already, they go up to do the mission where they get their powers, and there's another scientist who is going out with Victor and she doesn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
He blames them. There's your villain's motivation.
Yeah, that's much better.
Do you know what I mean? Like something like that where it just doesn't need to be there, does it? That the drive and the whole thing of their wedding and stuff. It just doesn't need to. It doesn't need to be there. The thing in this could have been, because it's hinted at. They sort of they try and fit a bit too much into it, don't they? With the whole, well, if we have kids, this isn't a normal life. Well, that could have been the emotional part of the story, and instead it's just sort of thrown away, picked back up again and thrown away. It's like, well, how do we raise kids in this life? Never mentioned again. And then I thought you two were going off. Yeah, well, what's a normal life anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me as well, I'd be interested to get your opinion. Because one thing I noticed watching both of them this time around, do Ewan Griffith and Jessica Alba, do they work together? Like, do they have much chemistry? Do you buy them as a couple?
No, well, I don't.
Because I don't think I do.
I assumed that it was because of the writing around them. I thought it was just because the script around them is quite weak, because they're using really basic language and tropes and techniques to really force this connection and to get you as the audience to really care about them and be rooting for them. But it just doesn't work. So I don't know if it's performance or if it's the writing, or if maybe it's a bit of both. I don't know, but it's not like I just don't care. I really just don't care. Like, and it's not that I'm incapable of caring. Like, I love a good, love story, sort of where it's appropriate and when it's well written, but I just didn't give a fuck about their relationship at all. So then when you've got so much of the film devoted to the fact that they keep trying to get married and it keeps getting messed up, I was like, oh, I don't care. It's like, oh, we're back in these scenes again. No, I don't give a shit. Like, and it was just such a huge part of the film. And I just think maybe, like I said, a well-written, maybe 10-minute prologue at the very, very beginning that shows something happening between them, develops that relationship, gives their feelings towards each other meaning. Maybe something happened and one of them had to make a really tough decision as to why they couldn't be together or something. Do you know what I mean? There's so many ways to do it. And they just didn't do it. And it really lets the film down, I think. All right, so we'll move on now then to talking about the critical reception. So I haven't seen this, and you think this is underrated?
I do.
I definitely think this is better than the first one. So I will take that into consideration. So I think the lowest score for the first one was around 28% from the critics on Rotten Tomatoes.
I've got it here. Do you want me to tell you what the average for the first one was?
Yeah.
So the average for the first one was 43% or 4 and a
Okay.
bit out of 10.
Okay, so I definitely think this is going to be higher. Probably not loads. So I reckon I'd probably give this one like a high 5.
Okay.
I reckon it maybe got a little less than that, and I'll say it got a low 5. I'll say that this got a 5.2 or a 52. Is where I'm going to sit with that.
So that would be underrated in your eyes?
That would be a little bit underrated for me, yeah.
Okay. So at the time of recording, then over on IMDb, gets 5.6 out of 10.
Okay. So I'm sort of leaning with them there.
Not too bad. And Rotten Tomatoes, the audience, they give it a very similar 51%.
Oh, okay.
Then we head over to the critics, and they give it 38%. Which averages out at 48% or 4.8 out of 10. So is that underrated then?
Yes, I do think that's underrated. And I'm not, given how sort of low the first one was scored, I'm not totally surprised at those ratings. I do think, were you? Yeah. Did
so
you
I
think
thought
it'd be
I thought this did worse than the first. Like I thought the first one, didn't I? Was sort of not well received, but middling, and I thought this was really poorly received. So the fact that this actually did better, I was surprised. You don't often see the second one doing better than the first one in these sorts of scenarios. So I was surprised by that. But yeah, so you're saying underrated then?
I do think that's underrated. Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's not. Listen, it's not. It's not amazing, but for me, it's a solid 6 out of 10 film. Okay, there we go then. That's another one in the bag. So both Fantastic Four films from 2005 and 2007, both we think that they're underrated. Next week, Fantastic Four 3.
I think haven't we got to do Fantastic Four from 2015, which from what I've seen did not do very well at all, but I haven't seen it. Is that on your list, Josh?
No.
I'd love it if that was on your list. No.
I can't bring myself to pick that. It's so bad.
I'll have to go away and watch that separately. If you
think it's underrated, we'll do it this time next year.
Oh, yeah, okay.
If you watch it and you think it's underrated, this time next year we'll do it. I'll make that, I'll give you that promise now.
I mean, let me tell you now, the scores are so bad.
Oh, yeah, they
I think unless the film is actually like a really poorly made film, then maybe it could be. Maybe I could find the argument that it is underrated. How about that? I'll have a look.
We will be back next week with another film and episode in your ears in all the usual places, so keep an eye out for that. In the meantime, if you'd like to get in touch with us, it's filmsandthatpod@gmail.com, and if you want to follow us on social media, we're on all the usual social media platforms. Just search for Just Films and That, and you'll find us. Give us a follow, get in touch. If you've got a film suggestion, we'd love to hear it. We're also on the television as well, aren't we, Alice?
We are indeed. Every Friday from 6 p.m, you can find us on the local TV network. So if you live in Birmingham, Bristol, Leeds, Liverpool, or the northeast of England, you can find us on Channel 7 on Freeview. Or if you live in North Wales or South Wales, you can find us on Channel 8 on Freeview. So that's every Friday evening from 6 p.m, me and Josh talking about all our favourite underrated and underseen films. And I'm also uploading the episodes onto Dailymotion. So if you head on over there and just search for Just Films and That, then we'll pop up for you. You can see our lovely faces talking about underrated films. Lovely.
Yes, lots of ways to see us and hear us. Get in touch with us, suggest a film and all that sort of stuff. But all that remains to be said is thank you very much for listening. We'll see you next week. It's goodbye from me. Cheerio.
Bye.